Hey, 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 you're tuned in to Robbie Shorter's The Thing About, a smooth podcast for the rough world we live in. Now available anywhere you can get your podcasts, to include Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Action. Hey everybody, how you doing? It's Robbie coming at you through the power of the internet, whatever you want to call it. And welcome back to another exciting episode of Robbie Shorter's The Thing About, where I bitch, moan, and groan about issues in society plaguing our country. And speaking of things plaguing our country, I have somebody here who has various opinions about the state of the world we live in right now. I am again reaching across the aisle, as I did in our previous episode with Mr. Rian coming on board, Executive Director for College Republicans. Here we have an actual Republican politician running for office, doing a pretty damn good job, if I must say, as a token liberal. And ready or not, here she comes, Mrs. Desi Anderson. Jump in, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Robbie. What an exciting time historically for our country and here locally, too. I am running for the 91st House Rep District here in Illinois. It's one of the top contested races across the state. So get your popcorn out. It should be fun. It's going to be a close race. No clear winner. Mm-hmm. So voter turnout is going to be huge for either candidate.
Absolutely.
Get out and vote.
Get out and vote. I have already taken the liberty of voting early. I actually voted on Halloween in costume.
Oh,
I was a Jedi.
Did?
Yeah,
I did not know this. Okay.
Yeah, I went over to the Bone Student Center because that's where they have the early voting going down, and I just walked in. It was October 31st. I got in my Jedi attire. I just walked in, and I was like, "Hey, I'm here to vote." And they said, "Cool, come on in." So, yeah, that was pretty fun.
Hopefully, you used your Jedi power to pick the best candidate and the best choice.
Well, the Force is a very strong and fickle thing. I will say I did vote my conscience.
Good.
I will say, as a certain senator from Texas once said, vote your conscience. I did. Desi is one of the people I did vote for. She's one of the few Republican politicians I did vote for. But she won me over with her story. And speaking of her story, Desi, if you don't mind, just give us your origin story.
Yeah, I'll do a quick recap so I don't bore everyone to death. But when I was 10 days old, I was abandoned in the streets of Bulgaria and was raised in an orphanage for the first almost 8 years of my life, and was lucky enough and blessed enough to be adopted to a family out on the West Coast. And so grew up there and had a normal childhood life, as folks would say. Middle-class family. I know we hear Kamala say that a lot, but I did grow up in a middle-class family. And what that looked like for me was when I got older and I was in high school, college was not an option for my family. They didn't have the finances or the resources to send me to higher ed at that time, so I went straight into the workforce after high school, which led me to a unique career path. I started working in the international nonprofit sector. Did that for almost 10 years, and my last stint was working in Guatemala. And during that time, when I was working in Guatemala, we were building from community centers, working with former MS-13 gang members, getting them out of that life cycle and giving them the opportunity to have scholarships where they could learn a trade, from being an electrician or mechanic. And so they would have the reality that their life has dignity and they're meant to do a lot more in life than just be a gang member. And so did that for almost 5 years and got burnt out, and came back to the U.S. in my late 20s and put myself through higher ed. Went to Indiana University at age 32, got my undergrad. I was considered a non-traditional student going back as an adult, and that was something powerful and meaningful for me. It was something I had to work towards. I did 3 jobs, and I would hustle and grind just to put myself through school because higher ed was important to me, and it is. And then I would meet my husband along the way, get married, and start a business here in McLean County. So a lot has happened in my almost 38 years of life, but
No way.
Yeah.
You don't Really?
I'm almost 40. I know people cannot believe that every time they look at me.
I would have said you were in like your mid-20s.
Oh, God bless you.
Oh, thank you.
No, I'm pushing 40. Maybe 40s is the new 20s. I mean, I'll take it.
I think it is, man. It's good genes, maybe.
Good genes. Yeah, something. I'm doing something right.
You're doing something absolutely right. So, Desi, I'm gonna ask you just a series of questions that have just been on my mind, as your token liberal friend, and you're gonna answer them to the best of your ability.
Hey, I've got more liberal friends than just you, just so you know.
Okay, well, I'm the only one that's do they have a podcast they've invited you on?
They don't. No, you up them for sure by a long shot.
Okay, just wanted to check, just wanted to be sure. But don't worry, this isn't going to be a charged interview or whatnot. I promise, this is not going to be me trying to push my radical leftist liberal agenda on you. I know how to speak politician, unfortunately. And so do you. And speaking of which, why are you doing this, though? Why are you aspiring to you're running as a state congresswoman, right? That's what you're going for?
State rep.
State rep. Okay. So why? What's the reason for this?
Yeah, a couple things. I actually ran last time for state senate and lost. The state senate, the way it works in Illinois, is it covers 2 House districts. And so looking at the one House district, which was the 91st, it seemed like it was doable and manageable for me to run again, where I have name ID this time and a little bit more understanding. But initially what led me to get into politics was being a mom and a small business owner in Illinois. Mm-hmm. And if you consistently look at the reports of how many families are leaving Illinois, how many small businesses are struggling, I decided, man, it's a wake-up call. The Republicans are in the super minority in Springfield. And so what that means is if we even have a piece of legislation that we think it's great and we're not able to work across the aisle and have a Democrat work alongside us, our legislation will not pass. We don't have we don't have enough votes. And so the reality is, for us to make Illinois more appetizing for families to stay here and invest their talents and invest dollars to start small businesses, we need to become less regulated. We need to relieve some of the tax burden. And so for me, I decided, why not? When we're looking at a democracy and understanding what that means, I think at the end of the day, people should have options on their ballot. And so I want to provide an option for folks that may not align with themselves with a liberal candidate or whatever their particular stance is. And so I think that's what we've done. I think we've done a great job providing a balance and an option for folks when they're going into the voting booth this election cycle.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'll follow that up with a question, because what made you swing as far as identifying as a Republican, especially considering Illinois is very much let's face it, it's a liberal bastion state. We're quite confident Kamala Harris is going to take the state away. But why run as a Republican? Or do you feel like you can go in there as a Republican candidate, especially considering at the top of the ticket, and I know this is the elephant in the room, but I mean, this election is ultimately going to come down to 2 candidates. Either Kamala Harris is going to be president or Donald Trump is going to get back into the White House. And considering how tense and hyper-partisan and vitriolic things have been, especially this election season, and what we have heard from former President Trump, how do you think as a Republican you can go in there? Just having that label alone has unfortunately become kind of like a scarlet letter for a lot of good, normal Republicans such as yourself who just want to solve problems and make the country a better place for everyone. But how do you think you can do that given how tribalistic politics has become?
Yeah, I mean, so I recall one of the first times I was able to vote in a presidential election It was right when I got out of high school, and I casted my vote for Barack Obama. And so what I like to think is myself as an independent thinker, where I have taken the time. I think this is what good civic duty means, is you take the time to figure out who's on your ballot and who's going to be the best candidate for that job. And so I have crossed party lines in the ballot box. And so I think for me is, historically, if JFK was around, I would probably still be a JFK Democrat today.
Mm-hmm.
But what has happened is the Democratic Party, and a lot of folks are saying this, the Democratic Party left me. I didn't leave them. And what that means is they went way too far to the left, and then you've got a group of Republicans that are not happy with the current rhetoric from the top of the ticket, Mr. Trump, like what you just said, where they feel like it's gone too far right. And then you've got a group of us that are in the middle and saying, wait a minute, we just want some common sense principles. We don't need the far right or the far left to dictate the future.
Mm-hmm.
One, we see what happens with the far right. We've seen what's happened to the far left. And what's happened is you've got more folks now worried about what we call Christian nationalism. Someone asked me about that,
Mm-hmm.
where they feel like, hey, we have not made a clear distinction between the separation of church and state. How do we honor that? And that is absolutely right. How do we make sure we do a good job separating the two? We are a multicultural, multi-diverse country, multi-religion, which makes us so unique, and that's what makes America the beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
But then you look at what the left has done, and I think for me, the main thing that I started watching during COVID and during the anti-law enforcement rhetoric,
Mm-hmm.
those two things started making me, probably redefine who I am as an individual and what I believe. And that, at the time, aligned more with the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
I think for me, we have, friends and family that are in law enforcement. You're going to have bad apples, absolutely. But to have the rhetoric to totally defund the police, have elected officials come out and just slam these men and women that are working tirelessly to serve our public, that's where, man, that's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me is, do we need to do a better job of providing training and provide mental health services when we're dealing with folks out in the community? Absolutely. Now, do we go on national TV and start just demoralizing our first responders? No. And so time and time again, I saw Democratic officials here locally. We have folks on the McLean County Board that are anti-police, anti-first responders. Mm-hmm. And that's unsettling to me as someone that lives in the community that wants a safe community. And then you look at what happened with the COVID. You saw folks that were struggling to make ends meet. You could go to a so-called red state, and businesses were booming for those small business owners. They were able to figure out how to mitigate. And so for me, when government starts overreaching, this is why a lot of folks feel like the government needs to stay out of your bedroom, right? This overreach. And when you start dictating, you can go to a liquor store during COVID, but hey, you can't run your restaurant, right? How did the liquor store become the essential business, but not a restaurant, right? And so I think that was some of the confusion and the frustration, what was happening at that time. And that kind of sparked of why I ran initially that first time. And looking at Illinois is specifically, you're right, Kamala Harris will win this. This is a deep blue state, no doubt about it. And those issues that the liberals absolutely love, they will continue to have. They have the supermajority in the legislative body. They have the executive power, with the governor being a liberal governor. you're not going to lose that. But I think to have a healthy government, you have to have balance.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have that in Illinois. So why not provide an option for folks?
I would agree with that. And to go back a little bit on a point you made earlier, as far as like everything that happened, the summer of love 2020, so to speak, our version of that. A lot of those protests and a lot of the things that you're talking about, I know involve the death of George Floyd. So that was a very tumultuous time here in America. And you're absolutely right. I do believe that politicians, especially politicians on the left, did absolutely run with it because one thing that I will say, and we're both people of color, Desi, and we don't deny that for a fact. And it's just, I think the pressing concern is, if I can speak for my more liberal friends, is when it comes to our law enforcement and our police, do I agree that they need to be defunded? Do I agree that they just need to be kicked out of their communities? Do I believe in, burning down buildings and, committing all these atrocities in the wake of someone's death? No, I personally don't. I don't agree with that. I served in the United States Air Force myself, so I do know a thing or two about, having to put the needs of others before yourself. So I understand, and I have the utmost respect for our police and for our law enforcement and for our military and our first responders. But I also, quite frankly, as a black man in America, cannot ignore the very real statistics from the FBI itself that people who look like me are statistically more likely to be shot down and killed by a cop. Do I believe that all cops are bastards, as the ABCB goes? No, I don't. But there is significant mistrust there, and I think once you get elected and once you're in office, you're going to have to navigate a very complex world when it comes to race relations and police and accountability and what is, I guess, to put some of their fears at ease, should we start seeing more, pro-police, pro-first responders, pro-military politicians such as yourself and frankly like me start to rise up? How do you intend to navigate that? How do you intend to put trust into those communities that frankly despise the police?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The numbers don't lie, the data doesn't lie, and what you saw, especially with the George Floyd incident, if anyone with a conscience was looking at that video, oh, absolutely, the way that happened with Officer Derek Murphy was unacceptable. Mm-hmm. And I think the juries made that verdict right when they came down with the full punishment of the law for him for his actions against George Floyd. But as you state, was that the appropriate response from the public to go down and start burning buildings, vandalizing? And you look at some of these communities where these protests were happening, where some of our low-income communities where they're struggling already, and they're, you're watching the interviews and they're saying, why do they light my, corner store on fire? So the reality is there's a lot of work that needs to be done between our minority communities and law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to happen overnight. And I think the more folks we have that are people of color that are willing to engage in those tough conversations are going to have the best impact in our community. One, they've walked those shoes. When I was flying, I'm from Bulgaria, so I'm a naturalized citizen. I'm dark, and if you didn't know the country of Bulgaria, people don't realize it's in Eastern Europe. But I at times could look like I'm even Middle Eastern or Southeast Asian, mm-hmm. And when I fly in the airports, at times I'm pulled aside, trying to figure out if I'm on a terrorist watch list. Where I've been interviewed, right? And so, but that's just the profiling, right? And I think that's what's often upsetting for people of color is they're using tools at times that they think will justify the reasoning of what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But here's the other thing too is Have I been upset when they've done that? Sure, absolutely. But do I understand? Am I understanding their logic of why they might be doing that? Sure. And so I think we need to have our law enforcement. We see it in Bloomington, Illinois, and specifically Bloomington Police Department has consistently done community outreach, either door knocking in their neighborhood, just introducing themselves. Hey, I'm Officer so-and-so. I'm helping covering these blocks. What are you guys' needs? What are your main concerns? How can I help be a service? Outside of them just sitting in their car and policing, right, and patrolling. And then they're doing like coffee with a cop, where they're just going into this community and say, hey, I'm available for breakfast or coffee. Let's engage. What do you have? And so I think as we continue to do community outreach, that should help fuel the relationship, where maybe people can trust one another again. And it's all about trust, right? And I think that's what you're specifically talking about is, as you say, with those FBI numbers, that is absolutely right, which is, it's sad in itself, right? To think that we are being profiled more, and we know we are, but so we've just have to do a better job. Continue to engage our law enforcement to do community outreach to those neighborhoods wherever they're patrolling. I think more departments across the state, across the nation should do that. I think it's been working in Bloomington from what neighbors are telling me and what Bloomington Police Department have shared with me. So I think, just doing community outreach helps.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you speaking so candidly about it, too. There's a lot of politicians tend to get squeamish when we start to talk about things like race and race relations and things like that. But I appreciate you being so willing and like, no, this is an issue. Let's tackle it head on. But there's a way for us to do it that we can work both as conservatives and liberals. We can all work together.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, when I've door knocked over 11,000 doors here in the 4 counties that I hope to represent. And what I find out is independents, Democrat, Republicans all want what is best for their family. Mm-hmm. And part of that formula is, hey, having a safe community that I can raise my kids in, knowing that if they want to ride their bicycle down the street, it's going to be safe for them. And so, and that's part of it of having a successful future, right, is making sure that our economy is strong and our communities are safe. And part of that is having those tough conversations with our law enforcement community. And I did get the endorsements from all of our agency locally, from the Illinois Sheriff Association to all 4 county sheriffs in the district, because I think it is important. It's uncomfortable to have those conversations at times, but they need to happen. Mm-hmm. And that's how we continue to bridge and make a stronger community.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I want to move now into talking about election integrity and election security, because that's been, especially by the former president, that has been a huge thing. He has already more or less laying down the groundwork, in my opinion, to just flat out deny the 2024 election. He has refused to concede defeat in 2020. And I guess the question I really want to ask you is this really going to become the new normal for either side, especially for people in the upper echelons of the Republican Party, but both sides, but definitely one side more than another? If we don't like the outcome of an election, I know that there are legal institutions in place where you can, file challenges and whatnot. But the thing is, though, is that this is just flat out, at what point does it not become you're a sore loser? The election's over. Let's restore the peaceful transfer of power. Let's, respect the will of the people. To the victor goes the spoils. And, if you don't win, then it's not because there were, space lasers changing ballots, or that there was dead people voting or illegal immigrants voting. We'll get into immigration soon too, Desi. But I guess I just want your thoughts on, as a, politician, as somebody who is, currently in the process of ballots being casted for you and for your opponent. What are your thoughts as far as election integrity and just respecting the will of the people? And, is it only going to get worse in the coming years, or do you think we'll go back to normal after this election?
Yeah, I mean, I think what you've seen is folks are concerned, right, about is there ballot, is there the process that we do here in Illinois. Do you know how many days we have for early voting?
No.
40 days.
Okay.
Couple challenges. What happens with that? I love early voting. Does it need to be 40 days? I'm not sure. I think one thing is, from a candidate perspective, really our messaging and try to meet voters is done in September when early voting starts. And what that can start doing is, save us some money too, where I don't have to figure out which ballots I'm chasing. If people just early vote, I can start tracking it down. So there's some benefits to early voting when it comes to cost saving things, resources I could do as a candidate. But I think the overall tone is, if you had just voter ID, and we provide that service, because I know often people are saying, well, I can't afford to get ID. But what about if we took more of a public service approach and said, you know what, we will guarantee every citizen in the U.S. to get a free voter ID. We will process it and pay for it. And you use that ID for all your other transactions. If it's to buy your alcohol, your cigarettes, to be able to rent a vehicle, to check into the hospital, to know who your identity is, and then to use it for voting.
Mm-hmm.
I think that would take maybe a lot of the speculation and the rhetoric out of the current landscape that you're seeing, because you're absolutely right. You've got folks that are worried about it. Me personally, when they've asked, hey, Desi, do you believe you lost last cycle? Yes, I do believe I lost last cycle. Mm-hmm. You're right. There's always going to be a winner and a loser. And did I spend my personal time talking about how I felt like my race was stolen? No. But I wonder would that help as a remedy as a whole for the country to find unity? If we... because that's the number one argument people would say, well, you know what, then you would be disenfranchising folks that can't afford an ID. Okay, what about then if we take our public dollars, our tax dollars, and say, you know what, election integrity is so important for everyone that be able to participate. We'll go ahead and purchase your ID so you have it, and then you can use it for your other daily functions of life. Mm-hmm. Would that be a solution that liberals would be okay with? I don't know.
I don't see why not, personally.
I feel like that would be a great solution, where then going forward, everyone can have a piece in their mind saying, hey, you know what? Everyone was asked to, for their voter ID when they voted at the booth today, or that might help take a lot of the unknowns that people may feel. Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Like, having just kind of an all-in-one multi-purpose ID would be pretty cool, and it definitely would free up some space in my wallet.
Well, yeah, but yeah, think about it. If we had like some type of a national program. Now, I've never even really shared this thought publicly with anyone, so I'm just kind of filtering it through.
Of course.
But imagine if we had like a national program where we get a national ID, you're a citizen, and then like it just tells you what state, and you can update that card if you move to another state, and it says now, you're back in Texas, and it would say Texas. Mm-hmm. But then that would allow you to then engage anywhere, and if you want to go in a casino, here's your ID, right? You have to have your ID to walk into a casino. You have to show ID to buy a lottery ticket. You have to have ID to buy tobacco. You have to have ID to buy your alcohol. Well, let's just make it easy then, and let's just standardize it, and let's have the government pay for it. So we're taking that that issue away. If folks can't afford to pay for ID, let's do that as a public service for everyone, and then require folks to use that ID.
Okay. I could see that maybe in like 20, 30 years from now, that being, because the federal government is slow as shit, so it's not going to happen.
Well, no, I think if people make it a priority,
if we make it a priority, about 10 years it'll get done. If we don't, give it about 30.
I don't know. I just don't know. I think you're continuing to see the tensions boil and be so high. I think it would tone down and provide unity for our country if we provided this solution on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides.
I would agree with that.
Because then you're absolutely right. You know, what's then the talking point next cycle? Because it wouldn't be that. You have your national voter ID card and you show up to the voting booth. You're leaving no room then, right, for any speculation. And I think that's what some folks are saying is, hey, we could find a way to remove the speculation if we just required voter ID. Why do we not require voter ID? I've lived in different parts, you know, in Guatemala, been in Africa and Sudan and Uganda and all those places. You've got to have a voter ID. In Guatemala, the way they do it is through a fingerprint. Your fingerprint is unique to you.
Mm-hmm.
And they run it.
You're good. Go ahead and let your sneeze out. No, you're all good.
Excuse me.
It can be a little dusty in here.
But what happens is it's so cool because in Guatemala, when I lived there for 5 years, there's a lot of folks can't read and write. And so the campaigning becomes unique. And so they do a ton of the posters with the face of the politician, and they'll do like icons of what they stand for. Like maybe groceries with a down arrow, they want to lower your groceries, whatever it may be, right? It becomes creative. And when you get your ballot, you're looking at the picture of that individual. You may, with their name on it, you may not be able to read it, but you've been able to see it in the community as they're hanging up their campaign posters up. You will put your thumbprint, and then they'll scan your thumbprint and make sure that's you because they have it in their national database. And when you walk around on election day, it's so cool because you see everyone's ink on their thumbprint of when they voted.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one way they've been able to figure it out.
Right.
And so I think, a lot of countries do it. Why does the U.S. not do it?
That is interesting. That is very interesting, actually. And I guess another point, two more things I'll hit on before we part ways. I promised you we'd chat about immigration and border security. Yeah. I know that is, for a lot of definitely more conservative people, securing our border and, restricting the flow of illegal immigrants coming into the country is a high priority, if not a top priority. For many of them, it's the only thing they're really voting on is just, hey, we need to secure our borders. But a lot of people, especially on the left, feel like, we need to have border security, but at the same time, where do we draw the line between securing our borders and just being flat out xenophobic? As we saw on Sunday, I believe it was last Sunday, Trump held a rally at Madison Square Garden. And, I gotta be honest, I watched some of it, and Tony Hinchcliffe, the so-called funny man, did not exactly leave a lot to be desired, I'll put it that way. The Puerto Rican community is kind of reeling, and which is bad because Pennsylvania has a very significant Puerto Rican community, I think of about 400,000 plus voters, and Trump is going to need those if he wants to win, or he's going to need a decent amount of those if he wants to win Pennsylvania. So obviously it's not just Tony Hinchcliffe. We have had Tucker Carlson was up there. I think Stephen Miller came out of his rejuvenation chamber to participate. Hulk Hogan, everyone's favorite, washed up grandpa, was out there. So it's like, and this is all coming in like the home stretch of the election. So Desi, what are your thoughts on, briefly, if you can touch on, what are your thoughts on all that in regards to immigration? Because I do believe in immigration policy and we need to have systems in place, but I'm not on board with the xenophobia to get there.
Sure.
So jump in.
Yeah, so a couple things. Locally, like I shared earlier, I've knocked over 11,000 doors. I definitely thought immigration, the topic, would come up in Chicago or more of your urban area, but people here locally are talking about immigration. Now, I don't know if that's fueled from the national level, and that's just happened to be seeping into their living room. And so when I'm door knocking and I'm saying, hey, what's the top concern for you? And they say the open border, and I'm tagging it, and I'm now starting to see a trend. How much is the influence from a national conversation is coming down at the local level? One, I think in Illinois specifically, the conversation is the whole state of Illinois is a sanctuary state. I don't know if you were aware of that or not.
I was, yeah.
So what does that mean for our agencies here locally? Do you know? If they come across an illegal immigrant, what do they do?
That is a great question. I don't want to make any assumptions. Will you mind educating me and my listeners on this?
So say someone, say a crime happened here and it happened to be an illegal. Our local agencies, because we are a sanctuary state, are not allowed to coordinate with federal agencies to let that individual know who they are and what crime they committed. Mm-hmm. So now we're having a breakdown of our system, and it's a pretty big one.
Okay.
So when you've got then folks, and this is why in Illinois, for example, and in a lot of states, we have no idea who's in our state because there's no communications happening between our state agencies and our federal agencies. Mm-hmm. As a mom, just not as a candidate, but privately, I'm like, how do we do a better job figuring out the influx of the millions of people that have come into our country? I mean, we're not talking about thousands. We're talking about millions and millions that have come into the country. When I lived overseas, there's no way I could allow my passport to ever expire, my visitation. A couple times I did in Guatemala, and it was not fun. Mm-hmm. I got the wrath handed to me from the government. Had to pay my late fees. I was denied re-entry, and I had to wait longer to come back because they have a system. They want to know who's in their country, right? And so each countries have the ability to protect themselves. They're their own autonomy, right? And one way we do that is, being able to figure out who's in our country. So taking it back to more of the local level in Illinois, when you can't have state agencies coordinating with federal agencies, that's an issue. And that's why people are talking about it here locally, is they want to know, hey, if someone did commit a crime over in New York and now they somehow made it to Illinois, we would like to know who that individual is and what crime they committed. But we won't ever know. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think is not settling well with a lot of folks. Now, I'm an immigrant myself via adoption. I became a naturalized citizen in America, right? I wasn't born here. And what I think is some of our national immigration laws are outdated, and they have been. And there's got to be reform at the national level and I have zero influence at the national level, but the immigration crisis is real. And as you're polling Democrats and Republicans in these surveys, it's consistent for both sides. And I think that's why you see both Kamala and Trump both talking about immigration. Mm-hmm. It's not just one party or another part. Both candidates currently, their talking points as they're finishing, trying to get their message across before tomorrow, both of them are talking about immigration. Right. So I think that's an indication that it is a national concern for everyone.
I would agree. It's definitely not in my top 5, but it is on my list of concerns because, yes, we have had incidences, far too many of Border Patrol agents being killed by, gangs trying to come over and whatnot. We have had a situation with, innocent people getting caught in the crossfire of incidents involving, people who are coming into the country illegally. But I still have this fear, though, that I feel like should Trump, and especially those with his rhetoric and ideology, get into power, they're not necessarily going to take the most humane approach to going about it. Because at the end of the day, yes, these people, the vast majority of people, in my opinion, it is duly and well noted that immigrants actually commit less crime than us apple pie eating Americans, because they have a shitload more to lose if they screw up here in the country. Then they don't want to be deported. But when you have politicians, especially like J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, and then various others, spreading all this rhetoric about, have a listen.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets.
So, yeah, you didn't know I had that queued up, did you?
No, I love it. No, yeah.
I did not have that. Okay, well, I didn't cue that up myself. I just came in here, started setting up the podcast. I said, hey, that red button wasn't red before. Let me press that. And then sure enough, there you go. So, but, and especially in regards to that bullshit, in my opinion, I listened to on last Sunday. It's like, dude, do you want to secure the border, or do you just flat out not want anybody? I don't hear a whole lot about the Canadian border being talked about. It's mostly, the Mexican border and whatnot. So how exactly do we accomplish this without being, xenophobic? Yeah. Because we need immigrants. Immigrants provide a lot, like yourself. Now, I'm sure there are plenty of immigrants who want to come into this country who have never an identical, but certainly a similar story to what you've experienced, and they may very well end up becoming Republicans themselves one day. And I just feel like they're not being given the chance to live their American dream, because there is this frankly disgusting, hateful rhetoric that the American dream is just for Americans.
Yeah, this is a unique question because I saw it from the perspective of living in Guatemala and Central America for 5 years. Mm-hmm. So I've met a lot of folks that did leave their communities in Central America to chase the American dream, right? So I saw what they were leaving behind in Guatemala to chase here in America. Mm-hmm. Couple things. I personally was asked when I was living in Guatemala, because they knew I had a U.S. passport, if they could pay me $10,000 and get them across the border. So human trafficking with coyotes is what they're called. That is legit, and it's a very lucrative business. Mm-hmm. Every family member that I met in Guatemala paid thousands of dollars to a coyote. Couple of them I would see them a year later, 2 years later, and they ended up coming back to Guatemala because they got caught, right? They were deported back. And what we were finding out is when I was like I said, in the nonprofit sector in Guatemala. So I was working with our social worker team all the time. And what we noticed, what was happening in Guatemala and Central America, was we saw a lot of single women households were being created once the men left Guatemala going to America. Mm-hmm. And we found out that women in Guatemala often didn't receive the same education and the benefits and resources that the men did, which you often see in developing countries, that men always have the advantage to have the ability to find jobs and go to school. Women do not. They often stay at home and become the caregivers. And so what happened was a lot of those men were not sending the money back to their families in Guatemala. They were then reaching out to our nonprofits and other nonprofits asking for resources. Mm-hmm. So what has happened then is we've now created generations of single mother households in Guatemala, in Central America.
Wow.
Because that income that they were expecting from the husband or the fiance or the boyfriend no longer was coming. Because oftentimes what happened is those individuals, those men, would start their own new life in America. Maybe they would meet another woman, start their own family here. And it's almost as they started a brand new chapter of their life and closed the one that was behind in Guatemala. What happens now to that single mother household that was just created?
They're at a significant disadvantage, it sounds like.
And that's what, so it's such a unique concept where for me, one, we've got to update our laws, right? We are in regards to the immigration of how many people we allow in the state. We are, and that's what made America so unique and different to the other countries out west, was we became a land of immigrants, and that is a beautiful part of our history, and we do need to keep that. And so it's a balance act. Do I have the sole answer for it? Probably not, right? But
it's a complicated issue.
It's a complicated issue. It would be interesting to see what would happen if we actually took government dollars and actually invested it in Guatemala and Central America, and see what happens if they were able to participate in those local economies, if they would find success. Because what I was seeing from a nonprofit perspective, living in Central America for almost 5 years, it's not like I was there for 5 months. Mm-hmm. 5 years is a long time.
It is.
And what I noticed was a lot of the social services that were being provided in Guatemala was dependent on the private sector, the private donors. So if it's maybe a church group or a nonprofit that is operating in America or Europe, like the Netherlands, there was a lot of NGOs from the Netherlands and Germany dumping dollars in Guatemala. And a lot of that was buying scholarships for these men and women so they could go to auto mechanic school or go to electrician apprenticeship. But what would happen if we, instead of, looking at immigration more of a unique way, what would happen if we invested maybe some dollars in those countries and allowed those folks to be successful in their own environment where their family is? Talking to a lot of the folks, they were absolutely torn having to leave their homeland and their family members behind to feel like they had to go to a different country to make money. Mm-hmm. They would tell me, if I was educated and I could make money here in Guatemala and go into the city and have a nice job, I would stay here. But I am in a poor rural area of Guatemala. I can't do that. And so part of it is the lack of infrastructure and development in Guatemala, and a lot of that was put on the responsibility of the private sector. Mm-hmm. And the way the private sector works with donations, if you have a strong economy and you're not battling inflation, more people are willing to donate their money.
I see.
If the economy is not strong and it's weak, hey, that extra $20 I thought that I could write that check to this nonprofit that I care deeply about, I'm not able to give this month. I've got to put it towards my groceries.
Of course.
So, I mean, there's just no easy solution. But it's a different perspective of what I saw. I know why they're leaving Guatemala. I know why they're leaving Central America. It is a hard place. And they want what's best for their family. And oftentimes, it is having better jobs out here. Absolutely. So, I'm definitely more of a democratic philosophy about that versus the Republicans. I think because I lived it, right? I saw it. I saw the dire need of why they were leaving their rural life. I mean, you don't have running water. They've got a bunch of hay as their roof. It takes one rainstorm to come in and just absolutely destroy what they have.
Right.
And so, I can't, as a person, as an individual, I can't disavow their pursuit of trying to, reach the American dream.
Of course. Yeah. So, there's definitely a lot of moving parts there. I personally just want the rhetoric to change or to evolve, because what I'm seeing on the other side is just, not all of them, of course, especially like yourself, but
no, you're right. That Puerto Rican joke was out of line, right? It was not acceptable, and and especially in a state
and those are U.S. citizens, so it's like.
That's exactly right. Well, and like you said, right, he did it in an environment. You're at Madison Square Garden. You've got thousands of people, right? And so
1939, there was also, and then
you just there's just some things you can't do, right? And that was, but you're right. That's all part of that rhetoric, and it's got to be toned down. And that's, I think, the issue that you're seeing with some Republicans of why they can't maybe vote for a Trump or willing to vote for Desi. It's because of the rhetoric, and I get it. And so I think for me moving forward, what does the Republican Party look like after Donald Trump?
That's a wonderful question. Is there a Republican Party after Donald Trump? We're going to have a part 2 to that at some point. But I do have one final thing I'll ask you. It's almost time for me to go to class, unfortunately. And you're a busy woman yourself. One more day until Election Day. Do you have any parting words, any words of wisdom, any words of advice that you would like to give people, regardless of the political spectrum, who aspire to be politicians themselves one day? And then just in general, what would you say to, any liberals tuned into this? What do you want people who would not agree with you or would immediately prejudge you because they see a letter R next to your name and next to your name? What would you want them to know about you?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm definitely unique. I like to think as myself as an independent thinker that has worked their butt off to make their own American dream. And I think that's what makes this country so great, that it doesn't matter what you're born into, you have the possibility to be able to work hard and try to achieve your dream, whatever that dream looks like. And so either way, win or lose, I'm thankful for this opportunity to engage with the public. I feel like I'm a better human being at the end of the day. I've got to meet so many folks across the aisle and listen to their concerns, and that makes me a better citizen for our community, and so I'm thankful for that. I think everyone should run for office because it teaches you how to be a better human being at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. It truly does. People are willing, and they do, they're willing to pick out your vulnerabilities, tell you how awful you are at a door, cuss you out, and then you've got to be able to keep up your chin and say, you know what, I've got to go now knock next door. What's the reaction going to be when they see me? So, make life whatever you can. You've got the opportunity here in this great country to make your own path. And no other country allows you really to do that. You have an opportunity to start a business, to start a family, whatever that dream may look like for that individual. But it takes hard work. It takes hard work, and you have to have grit. It was not easy when I put myself to school. The first year I didn't have a car, and I would be walking to my job, rain, snow, and sun, walking to be a waitress at a Mexican restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to save my money and buy a car and able to drive to school the next year. Was it fun doing that? No, but I had determination. I knew if I was going to be successful, I would do that. I had zero money in my bank account when I came from Guatemala back to the U.S. I was living in someone's basement because I couldn't even afford to get my own housing. I had 3 jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And I would walk to those jobs. I made sure I could find a job that I could walk to. And I started saving money. A year later, I would be doing an internship at Capitol Hill, going to Indiana University. You got to push yourself. Nothing's going to come easy. Do you have that grit and the resilience to push through and overcome?
Absolutely. I did totally snap a photo of you mid. Just want to get your. This is going to look great. I promise.
Yeah.
But I did want to catch a picture of you while you were in your zone. I think you'll agree. You want another one?
Oh, no.
Okay.
I trust you.
All right.
Trusting you're not going to make fun of me. And
No.
make me look weird.
I think I'm going to send it to you right now as soon as we're done here. I think I took it in portrait mode too, so it looks really nice.
Oh, look at you.
Oh, yeah, though the camera does most of the work, but
you got to hold it steady as
that is the tricky part. Yeah.
Sometimes I have a shaky hand. So, well, Robbie, thank you
for
your time. What a delight, honestly, to have met you this school year. And I would consider you as one of our future independent thinkers. And that's what, honestly, we need more in society is individuals that are willing to look at the hard issues and be critical and figure out, man, is this the best outcome for me as an individual? Is this the best outcome for society? So I seriously have been impressed by you.
Thank you.
And your ability to do that. And you can see the goodness of your heart, and you do it because you love people. And
most people.
No, but you do. At the end of the day, you are willing to have those tough conversations with folks that you don't necessarily agree with, or even just to tune in, right? For you to have the ability to tune in and watch that Madison Square Garden rally and have the ability to say, gosh, yeah, that's inappropriate. Or man, okay, I could see where you're coming with that idea. Not many people can do that right now in today's world.
It has become extremely polarized, yeah.
It does. It has. And so I commend you for being a young man that has the ability to do that. That in itself is a gift. So keep up the good work.
Thank you, Desi. I greatly appreciate it. And I appreciate you, everybody. Round of applause for Desi Anderson. We have that button, too, as well on the soundboard.
Man, I had no idea how many buttons he had over there.
Yeah, there's quite a few. I'm not going to do the boo one, though, because this was too great. But thank you, Desi, ladies and gentlemen, Desi Anderson. I hope to have you on a future episode real soon. And, yeah, this was great. This episode will be up tomorrow, so on Election Day.
Awesome.
Yeah, so you're going to be live. I will let you know when it's up and running. My listeners will know when it's up and running. You should be getting the notifications, Notification Squad, turn them on. And, yeah, this was great. Desi, thank you so much for coming, and I really appreciate you. Of course, you have my vote. I already voted for you.
Well, thank you.
So, yeah, I'm looking forward to I'll be keeping my eye on you tomorrow night and watching the polls very closely.
Thank you.
For my token Republican politician.
Hey, I'm glad I could be that token.
Absolutely. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Robbie Shorter's The Thing About. And, yeah, thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye. You can say bye, Desi.
Bye. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.